We're good. All right. So we are discussing 9.04 today. And to start us off, I would like to hear your guys' general impressions of the chapter. Anything you liked about the chapter, anything you didn't like about the chapter, any overarching thoughts you had. And I'll just start us off here in Asteria. If you would like to give your opinion afterwards, then we'll go to anyone else who has an opinion. But this chapter was, I think, well, it was obviously the very first chapter this volume that didn't focus on Aaron. Well, except for the interlude. But that I kind of skipped over that in my mind because we read it basically before the start of the volume, so it's kind of weird in my mind. But yeah, it's the first chapter that's been written this month, I should say, that's not focused on Aaron. And it had quite a bit of plot progression. Like the whole entire chapter was focused on this rush to Israel, basically. And I thought that was very interesting because last volume when we kind of got the new lands in Israel, I didn't expect it to be as big of a plot point as it's being right now. And we've gotten quite a bit of progress going on with um with the with the exploration of this new land. So I'm actually really excited to see if we get, concentrated exploration points of views because that's one thing that we haven't seen a huge amount of in TWI is like explorations of brand new land. We've seen dungeons before and kind of the high passes a little bit, but those aren't new. It's not like coming and seeing a brand new land. And so I'm really looking forward to that. Anyways, those are my thoughts. What about you, Asteria?
It was nice to see Relt and Jakras get a mention along with Jacana. Noticed that her title was still missing. So eagerly looking forward to checking in with them. I noticed that Pirate has continued doing sort of callbacks to different characters that we haven't seen in a while, but that's always really nice to see. It adds more continuity. I've commented on it before, but I will continue to comment it because I really do appreciate it. And yeah, I think it was a nice chapter. I think the length was just about right. Any longer, and it would have dragged on a bit. So yeah, this was a fun one.
Yeah, the chapter length was, what was it, like 22K words or something like that? It was, short in terms of how long we've been getting chapters, but it definitely felt very good because, we covered, I think it was 4 points of views overall. Like, we covered Blighted King, Floss, um, what's his name? Oh my gosh, I'm blanking on his name.
As Crash,
Crash, yes, but it wasn't who I was thinking of. It was
Blighted
Terry
King,
and
As
Eldaven.
Crash, Eldavin,
Yeah, and Terry.
Terry, Sleepy Dragon,
So that's
and
5.
Torin.
Torn's as Crash POV.
No, it is not.
I'm talking about like overarching big, one place POVs. Like
Uh-uh.
like Floss was covering actually two different point of views from Trey and Terry's.
Paris, Therese, Teresa, whatever her name is.
Teresa. I don't know how to say the shortened version, like Terrace or Therese, but Teresa is easy enough. Anyways, Miss Europe, what did you want to say?
Just that I really like this chapter, and it is a bit frustrating because with every section of this, I just want more of that part. And now we already had lots of things to look forward to and that we wanted, and this just feels like a chapter that adds even more of it. I want to see more of Chandra and just finally everyone in the same area for the first time in well, if you count Amorous, first time ever. Trey and Terrace actually being in the same spot for the first time since what, volume 6 or something. Uh, I just loved every section of it. even surprisingly the Otheus Blighted King point of view.
Wait.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The
Go ahead.
character work in general, like all the characters were really enjoyable to read.
The switch, and like in particular the switch back and forth between the two twins and seeing how they view each other differently. Like we spent a lot of time with the boy twin, Troy, and is it
Trey.
Troy? Trey. And seeing his perspective of his twin and then jumping to her and seeing his perspective or her perspective of him, I thought was really nice because it does give you a perspective of how I like to see how the characters view each other. Like it's a nice little detail and in agreement with you. The playback was nice.
Yeah, and overall, and what you're saying about all these little setups, and you just want to see more of that. I think that's exactly what this chapter is, trying to do. It's trying to set us up for what we should be expecting are major plot lines later on in this volume, and it's really exciting because uh, instead of basically it being a volume end kind of deal with volume 8, where everyone comes together at the very end, we're going to be getting this rush for Israel, and we're going to see all these people come in maybe at the midpoint of the volume, maybe earlier in the volume, even. And so we'll be able to explore this place with all of these characters in the same place, and it'll be really interesting to see how Pirate Abbott accomplishes that.
You know what this setup for all this was the band of rescuing the band of the inn, right? When we had all those groups come together and they were off to rescue Mishra, and now we've got similar groups that are going to be acting as what is it?
Explorers.
Proxies for various larger interest groups, all exploring this new land.
Yeah,
So the Fellowship of the Inn has continued in a new adventuring form.
yeah, it'll
Also,
be.
go
Go
ahead.
ahead. No, you
Well,
go.
not crazy, right? The female twin's name was Teres. No?
Yeah, it's Teresa is her full name, but it's shortened to Tres most of the time.
Okay, but Pirate went back to Teresa this chapter.
Yeah, so like her nickname is shortened without the A. That's like her nickname basically.
All right.
But yeah. Um I wonder if, the inn itself or Liscor itself will have a team that's sent there because we haven't really seen uh anyone kind of volunteer from the inn basically or from that location. So I think seeing the Adventurers Haven come through and have it like kind of pick up people while it goes, because I don't think it'll stay in Liscor. I think it'll go to the new lands. I think that's the major reason why they're moving south. But I think
Probably. But they're also looking
maybe,
at their competition.
yeah, they'll scope out their competition. But I mean, it's called Adventurers Haven. What better place to have it than in the new lands,
Oh,
you
you know
know?
what would have been really cool is to see the inn that Ryoko used to be staying at with the crazy
Oh
former
yeah.
adventurer innkeeper.
Well,
I would love to see him pop up again.
yeah, and Albert. I know Albert has been getting some attention in chat because he's been absent for so long. But
Another character, Ranarus. You wanted to
yeah,
Ranarus, Russ, that you wanted to talk.
Sure.
How do you pronounce your name?
Ranaris.
Ranarus. Okay.
I think the nice thing about this is like exploring the new lands is gonna take time. So like I don't feel like I feel like there's a lot going on. But nice thing is like it doesn't feel like there's a timer going on. I felt like with last volume, especially towards the end, it felt like there was just this timer of like, all right, we were on a timer, we gotta go. I feel like now we can kind of have like a slower pace, exploring new stuff. I think it'll be some interesting clashes, right? I think there's gonna be a lot of different groups interacting with each other. I mean, the fact that Floss is sending a group is, I think, gonna. I mean, that to me that immediately screams like there's gonna be some kind of conflict there. Um, and then I think, and a wild card could be like, we'll get to this maybe later in, but it's we got the scene with Az and Torin, and I think Torin could show up there, and that could be interesting, especially with his class of relic guardian. So he definitely, is capable of punching above his weight. He took out a Bellavere cloth golem, and like, if I'm remembering correctly, I feel like the cloth golem just like smashed a bunch of gold ranks way back when in like volume 7, like when Bellavere showed up at that one village.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
the Cell's little gold adventuring group that she's sponsoring, what their names are. They're the only ones that survived. Well,
It was a flesh golem.
Yeah, it was
oh, different golem.
I don't think it was the same exact golem because that one was, I think it was destroyed in the end
Yeah, but
because
I'm just saying, like, that's the
yeah,
level of like,
yeah. It
that's the
certainly
level.
was a very powerful golem, and Torin kind of just, well, he off-screen destroyed it, so we can't say how easily he did it, but I mean, we can pretty
Well,
much
he
say he did it
survived,
easily.
so
Yeah,
yeah,
he
to me
he
that's like
survived.
pretty good.
Yeah, and
Um, so I think that could be interesting. I think that is like a Torin healing slime. I think, which you know it kind of pretty like we got at the end of the chapter of like, hey, deal Ailer Joe is or where you're no longer getting the supplies. I do think that I don't know that that's like necessarily gonna go away in terms of like healing potions and stuff, because I'm like, if I'm remembering correctly, it's like a plant and then you make gel out of the plant or whatever. So it's like, couldn't like a Nateslia or an equivalent grow that? Maybe not to the level it was growing there. So like you might have a more limited supply of healing potions. I don't think that healing potions are like going away entirely.
yeah,
But
I don't know if I well, I don't think it's ever been said whether or not uh, air gel can be produced anywhere else, but we'll definitely see in the future. But I think healing potions and their substitutes are going to be another big plot point this volume. And I really
yeah,
hope Raldun, or however you say his name, I have no idea, is involved in that because that's just kind of a cool little way to introduce a new Earther, is to have a problem that he can help out with.
yeah, definitely. And I think Um, I think Octavia is in a good spot to actually like contribute a lot here, because she's been, she went with the fellowship. Um, and I will just say like Marisha, not the most reliable narrator, right, in terms of point of view, but like I think it was last chapter she was basically saying like, we all got something out of like our participant, like everybody who survived the no moot got something. I think Octavia did not necessarily have an active role, but she was definitely like learning about different things. So I could see Octavia just kind of coming in strong. I don't think it's gonna be like, I think Salus will play a part, but I think Octavia's gonna kind of pick up a different path than him. Salus is more like combat focused. I feel like Octavia is gonna have the opportunity to like get some different skills. Like Salas already has his skills. Octavia doesn't, so she has more potential to like grow into somebody who's, maybe dealing healing potions or other type of restorative things. She did like the Oscillium, so
Yeah,
I'd be curious to see if we get more Octavia this volume.
it'd be really interesting to give her some more screen time too. Like I hope we just get a more alchemist focused alchemist focused point of view this volume, simply because we have the reason for it now. We have that we have the healing potion shortage, so we
We're
could get,
setting up a lot of perspectives, though. That's a
yeah. But it's a whole volume, you know? Like last volume, we saw so many different storylines happening, and I'm not expecting the exact same amount of storylines this volume, but I'm expecting a few. But let's move on to our first question. And
hey, real quickly, do you think the air gel plot is actually going to be resolved in the comic stuff that was being written, since that seems that island is towards closer to the end of the world?
It could be. Yeah, it absolutely could be. We could
'Cause-
see
Go
it.
ahead.
We could like, well, maybe not resolved because, I don't think the comic will release quickly enough for healing potions to actually be resolved, but um I do think that we'll see what happened there in the comic rather than in the main story.
Yeah, and I wonder if so just looking at the plots that seem to be setting up, right? It seems like the dwarf plot is finally coming to the forefront. We've got the obviously the adventuring in the new lands. We've got we also seem to have something going on underwater, right? It seems like we're supposed to be setting up to dive further into the underwater areas because right, Sammy went missing when he was being transported over the waters. There's hints of these krakens and things like that. Those seem to be the main three areas. I wonder if the air gel is going to be tied into the undersea city plots, though. If that makes sense, because the
Well,
island's gone, disappeared.
well,
Is
yeah.
Sammy like missing?
I don't know. Yeah, I was about to say I don't think Samuel. We haven't heard from Samuel yet, but I don't think he's missing per se. Maybe he is because we don't really know, but he just
Come on.
hasn't been on screen since
There
he
was the
left.
line of Ryoko's like, I hope nothing goes wrong. Everything
Okay,
should be fine. And then
that
he disappeared off into the waves. Like, come on.
yeah, he's fine, Asteria. Let's just go on the assumption he's fine. Anyways, let's get
Fine.
on to the next question because we've been on this
Vampire
general talk for a
squids.
while.
Are they
No,
sentient?
no, Asteria. I'm gonna do this question next, and then you'll pick a question, okay? And if you want to have that as your question, we'll do that one. But first, um, the first question we'll be talking about is, did we miss a big threat? As in at the beginning of the chapter when the Armageddon level threats were discussed. Should there have been a different one than the three or some of the others mentioned? Um, so who put this question in? And if you put the question in and you want to give your response to the question, go ahead and just at me. But otherwise, I'm not sure if we missed any big threats. Like, it's hard to say because as we know, there are a lot of threats to the world, but not many that are on the same level as the ones we see, as the ones that were listed, which were, let me just find the line. Um, it was demons, Krellers, and Rahir, basically, which is all basically the same exact point. Also, I guess we saw, uh, that was the very start, and then we saw that Loss was considered one, and As Crash was considered one. But it's like, who else is there? There's Alien Dominus, basically, and then
They were
there's
mentioned.
yeah, but they weren't given a lot of time. But
No, but they were the Alien Damas Immortals were
yeah,
mentioned.
I guess maybe
Uh,
the Died Lands could be considered a threat now, simply because no one knows
I thought the
exactly
big
what happened.
Well, I thought the big one that was left out. This was actually my question, so ha, you chose my question anyway. Um, I think the big one that I thought was missing was the dungeon, right? Like the dungeon under the Sore, or maybe the dungeon that just reawoke in Valereros that Niers, in theory, conquered way back when. That would be my thought.
You know, I think the reason why those aren't considered is because in the Balaros one, at least, Niers conquered it before. So it's known that they can be uh kind of conquered by a single adventure team. That it has to be a high level team, obviously, but they're still capable of doing it. And to be like an Armageddon level threat, you need more than just a single team of high level adventurers to finish it off. Um, Mr. Europe, you wanted to answer.
Yeah, there's the only one. Obviously, there's the gods, which
Yeah,
most people
yeah.
don't know about. But the only one really that fits is Actelius, because all the other ones that have been mentioned, including the Died Lands, whatever's going on with the Krakens or whatever, none of them really fit the definition giving it start for Armageddon events. Like there's cataclysmic stuff or like big big dangerous things, but the definition they give is at least the potential for at least 3 nations per continent being destroyed. And even like none of the others really have the potential to do that. I mean, maybe if all the krakens of the deeps come up and just destroy all the coastal nations, but there's no real indication what's going on underwater, really.
Land krakens. They'll come up on the land and destroy the land too.
I mean, that works.
We know that there are vampire ones.
Do we know that there are still vampire ones?
Yes, it was confirmed this chapter that there are vampire krakens. And that means that they must be sentient and be able to level if they're vampires, which means that there's some crazy potential there.
Okay, let's not get too detracted by your crazy vampire kraken theories. I definitely agree with you though, Mr. Europe and Ranarus agrees too, saying that Actelius Slash is probably the big one. It's not really known by too many people though. I think maybe the Kuras and Fedohep know for a fact that that's a really big issue right now. And some of the leaders, I guess, on the boat probably understand that it's a big issue too. But it it's not widely known at this point, and Actelio Salish has been around for thousands and thousands of years at this point without causing a world level threat. So I think that's why it's not really considered an Armageddon level threat. But for us, the readers, obviously, yes, that does qualify, and it is probably a big one.
Sorry, I actually forgot to bring up the last thing.
Oh yeah, go ahead.
If Yeah, there is one more threat, which I also don't think it's quite apocalyptic level, but it was unmentioned. Is that there's still a gigantic city full of Raskar down underground?
Yeah, see, the thing is, again, with that, I just don't know if they're powerful enough. Like, they're kind of just trapped under there. But it could be.
Yeah, it's
We'll see.
not quite apocalyptic, but
Yeah, we'll see though. I hope we get to that at some point this volume, but we'll see.
Actually, one I was surprised that wasn't mentioned also was goblins, right? If the goblins go crazy again because Rags figures out the secret of the kings that drove them mad and also goes mad, that's shown to have been a continent level, multi-continent destroying force as well before.
I thought they
True.
mentioned goblins.
Did they?
I believe they did.
Goblin.
yeah,
Oh yeah,
if you
the
asked
third
for
greatest threat to world peace, they'd say goblins. Yeah, they did mention goblins. You're right.
Fair enough. Closer reading than I.
Yeah,
Very nice.
it was just a one-line thing, so it's not, you know. Anyways, um, let me just read out these comments now. Lucy Frustra, I hope I'm saying your name right, says, I'd say the Blighted King is one of the biggest threats currently, with him running magic that naps people from other universes. And yeah, I'm gonna say this after. Well, actually, no. I thought I saw another comment, but I think the Blighted King definitely is the bigger of the two threats on Rahir rather than the Demon King. Like from all that we've seen so far, the Blighted King is just much more of a threat than the Demon King ever will be. Like even without the foreknowledge that he kind of tries to take over the world. It's like, even if I didn't know that, it just, the Blighted King has done so many bad things, whereas the Demon King is really just kind of combated the Blighted King, and that's it. But yeah, Rhanerys, I've already said this, but Rainer said Actelio Salash. Trustworthy Shawn says the biggest threat of all was missed if the dead gods weren't mentioned. And yeah, definitely the dead gods are the biggest threat. It just obviously in-worlders don't know about it and can't know about it really up till now. Lord Panther says, with the uprooting of Kraken Pass to make the new continent, I'm surprised they displaced giant squids. The displaced giant squids aren't more of a concern. All right, listen. They're all in the ocean, okay? They're not land krakens. We don't have to worry about them. I'm sure no one will ever have any issues with them whatsoever. They're just not a problem. We all know it. They don't matter. Alusi Frustra says you can just not go over water, lols. Exactly. You just don't go into water. It's really simple. It's a simple thing to do, and it gets rid of all Kraken-related problems. Part-time Hermit says they can cause large fissures since they'll be large Kraken land. I hate you. You're a punner. I don't like puns. Oh yeah, that actually brings to mind the worst class ever mentioned in this chapter, Pun Master. And we all know Part-time Hermit is a pun master. Karma Creeps says Karma Creeps. I have no idea how to say your name either. Says don't necessarily need to be sentient to be vampires. Yeah, see, that's my thought on that too, on your vampire kraken theory, Asteria. So I just don't think they need to be sentient to be vampires, but we'll see. I do think krakens may be sentient though, because how do you get that big and
Could be
not be sentient?
thralls, right? But that's not vampire. That's a vampire thrall. But if a vampire can level, ergo sentience, because only sentient beings can level. There are other non-leveling sentient beings. That is true, but all leveling beings have shown to be sentient. So
Okay, that's true.
sentient krakens that are secretly meeting in the depths to come on land or sky and destroy. I think it's coming.
Anyways, Asteria, by the way, pick the next question you want, since we're almost done with this one. Well, we will be done once I get through these comments. So just pick the next question and post it in chat, please. Polaric says, maybe to the other two Dragon Lords, they're Terriarch level beings on the power scale. They're also old, and all the hints about them in Volume 8 makes me think we might see them this volume. They're also a completely unknown quantity allegiance-wise, apart from Terry and Riss still disliking them. Maybe you could be right. We might see them as a threat coming forward, but that kind of depends on how they, see the rest of the world. Like, we don't know anything about them, so it's hard to say if they're an actual threat to the world. Dice says Blighted King sounds like endgame villain, and he certainly does. Because, well, we kind of know he is a bit of an endgame villain with him trying to conquer the rest of the world in the future. Alusi Frustra says Blighted King versus Demon King seems like a kindergarten fight that was blown out of proportions to me. I'm not sure that's exactly true, but interesting perspective there. Trustworthy Shawn says Blighted King is motivated purely by vengeance according to this chapter. We already know it doesn't end well. Evan says, where did the new continent get pulled up from? We had a bit about that in this chapter, and it was like parts of the seabed and literally just parts of underground Israel just pulled up. Probably, we never really actually got it confirmed in the chapter, but it probably is a bunch of new land, like generated basically, because how else are they going to get all that land up there? Maybe. Anyways, who knows? Pancake, Pancake, Conk. I have no idea. All your names are hard, okay? All of them. Panconk, Pan. I can't say your name at all. Something interesting is in passing, the Blighted King mentions that another nation on Rahir once tried world conquest. The Blighted Kingdom might have originally been the Demon Kingdom, and then the nations made a new Blighted Kingdom because that one went bad, and now we are seeing the same thing happen again. Alusi Frustra says, but dragons are sentient, they don't level, your logic fails us. Trustworthy Son says, let's add confirmation of sentient vampire krakens to the pile with Jakishi the friendly crawler. That's actually a good question for the AMA. I actually want to know if there are friendly crawlers around or if vampire krakens are sentient now. But with that being said, oh wait, Dice says if a monster eats a flesh chosen, then does that open the monster into becoming a thrall of Axelash? Maybe, who knows? But with that, we're gonna move on from this question. So Asteria, how about you read out the question you chose?
Yes. What was your favorite artwork and why was it Niers?
Is this a real question, Asteria? Is it?
What do you think? I know Lynette was squealing when she saw the artwork. I thought ArtsyNada had it down themselves.
My favorite artwork is the Aaron and Silverend one, where they're posing. I like that one the most.
Oh,
Or the
Silveron was so adorable.
Silverend Sweepstakes one is also good. They're both
Yeah,
good. They're all good. All the
they were
artwork
cute.
is great.
You can have a favorite though.
I don't. Except maybe the two I just mentioned.
But no, I know people are so in a more serious question, Delvin is back. He's gunning for Azkarash. Is he our big bad for Volume 9, or is he perhaps a larger plot line? And are Delvin and Terry possibly still linked? And what repercussions is that going to have if that's the case? Wheels, your thoughts?
I don't think he's going to be the major villain of Volume 9 only. I think he's going to be just the major villain going forward. I don't think we're going to get him resolved in Volume 9, I should say. So he's going to be a very big issue just for the remainder of the story, basically, I think. I don't know. Like, Eldiven, I don't see as being someone who is taken care of without taking care of the gods as well, because he's being backed by them now, and he is definitely their most valuable asset at this time.
I think that's the
And
case, but I'm kind of wondering if if you think about a typical fantasy sort of setup, right? You have like the general or like the person that you take down before the big master, and if the gods have to use proxies to play through, right? Potentially there's Lakin if Beardy ever gets back.
yeah,
You've got obviously you've got Eldavin with either Death Queen or her daughter. I'm not sure who he linked hands with. But I'm wondering if Eldavin is going to be kind of set up as the big bad, because there was that really chilling line by the Blighted King was right. Eventually everyone will give everything for Rahir, for the Blighted Kingdom. And he's just sort of setting himself up to be the crazy spiraling maniac. And I could totally see him eventually reaching out once he figures out, who and what the gods are, and he won't let go of this vendetta that he has against the so-called demons. I could easily see the Eldavin situation being resolved this volume, and then we end up, because remember, the Blighted King was the one that sort of kicked off this whole nonsense, because he was the one that did the summoning right to begin with. So I think he's going to be our longer term, and somehow he's going to end up connected with the gods. They're going to reach out to him, and they're going to use him as their pawn. Would be my thoughts.
yeah, I you're right in that I do think the Blighted King is going to be another big bad guy in the end, but I don't think it'll be limited to just him. I think Eldiven will be working alongside him basically. It's going to be a whole big thing, and I onto the second part of your question, are Eldiven and Terry still linked? I definitely want to say no. I think they're absolutely not linked anymore. We saw that in this chapter that Eldiven even says he no longer has the access to the bottomless well of power that he did before. but now
Mean
he's
that
a
it's
leveling
he's
alive person.
right, but it just could mean but remember the curse, right? The time curse still seems to have struck both of them.
Oh no, Terry's just an old fart. He's like he gets exhausted from everything, basically. Everything
Really? Because
physical.
I read that as being still struck by the time general. I don't think it's just
Oh, and
Aldeban. I
like
thought it was Terry as well.
when Terry was fighting the Wyvern Lord back in volume 7 or 6 or whatever it was, he breathed fire or something. He did very little and he just like panted from exertion basically. So it's basically an established fact that Terriarch is just extremely out of shape physically.
I
Like
don't know.
magically, he's just amazing, but physically,
I
he's
I
not
could
good.
see an end of well, I could see an end of volume, like resolution of having to deal with each other and potentially like Terry or Eldivan reabsorbing one versus the other. Anyway, that was just sort of my thought as to why he might be a volume 9 kind of plot point, but be wrapped up after that. But there's a few other people who have had thoughts. Polaric, you want to speak?
Yeah, and what Dice just said, I fully agreed with. Like, we know that Eldvin definitely took memories from Terriarch, so it's not implausible that Eldvin also took, all the optimized fight spells, all and some of the combat magics that he employed in Island Damus. My frustration with this scene mainly is just that this really, really undermined everything that was built up at the end of Volume 8, especially 8.82, 8.85, the epilogue, where we have this entire personality change from he met the Dragon Lords who entrusted him with a mission that we don't exactly know what's happening yet, but like now he knows he can't just sweep the years away in his cave forever. He has to wholeheartedly influence the world, and in this chapter he is just a comedic foil who can't fly, which I know like the lack of his physicality was already established in prior chapters, like the Wyvern fighting as, but I did not expect it at all to be this bad. And so this really brings up the question, right? Like, how is he going to get to Island Davis? He can't fly. How is he going to make it across the ocean? I assume that teleporting is out of the cards, just because I feel like he would have tried it already. And this also back to the Elven magic stealing point. Eldivin's not going to die anytime soon. So how is Terry going to figure this out? So I feel like this really frustrated me as a Terriarch fan, and this also pushed his arc back immensely. Like, I don't think we'll be seeing him in Island Damus for who knows how long.
Well, on the magic side of things, I mean, he's literally taking a nap, floating through Israel while he's taking a nap. I don't know if he's
Polaric
really.
has a good point about the whole teleportation thing. Like, why isn't he teleporting there?
I don't know why he's not teleporting. I can't say. Like, I honestly have no idea. I don't know if it's because Eldivan took that knowledge or if he just can't. I don't know. I really don't.
See, this is why I think he's struck by the time curse. I think he's just too like I think he's that I would say that I think he's struck by the time curse as well still.
We've never actually seen a dragon or Terach in general teleport himself. We also know that things of a magic has weight when it comes to teleporting. Things that are extremely super magical are more costly to teleport. I don't know if it has something to do with that. Maybe we know that things like dragons have dragon ships and don't like travel just in teleporting. Who knows where Pirate will take that as a reason why he didn't teleport, but there could be some.
Yeah, we'll have to see because it's certainly odd why he wouldn't teleport. Maybe it's because of that. Yeah.
Well,
Reading out
some
some of
other
the what do
some
you
other
go ahead.
thoughts interrupting Wiggles before he gets the chance to speak. Lord Panther thought that Eldavin is going to be the big bad and doesn't think he's like the Terry anymore. He's no longer an immortal, and that's why he could level now. That being Eldavin, not Terry. Lyric, you shared your thoughts. D Dice, I thought that Terry was missing a lot of his magic knowledge after giving it to Eldavin. Polaric agrees. So Dice is saying no magically assisted flight because he's just missing Terry's just missing the know-how for it. Trustworthy Shawn thinks that he was out of shape from sleeping in his cave forever, and the great war between dragon and worm point to severity. Reese keeps in shape. That's a good point. If there is a showdown, Terry's out of luck. Karma Krebs says that if the gods could reach out to Adalvin, could they now reach out to others? Having some secret bad guys or allies that could turn would be cool as plot twists. And I would agree. I think that's kind of the larger scheme and the grand things is to start winning allies and start kind of getting these little religious foundations back. Mr. Europe thinks that Terry being tired was just to juxtapose him to Reese being active and exercising. Dice says probably a combo of out of shape and missing magic knowledge once again for why Terry is just being a lays about. Mr. Europe thinks that the main weird part about Terry being so out of shape is how he lectured Grimmelkin on just using spells to make yourself fit. That's like another good point. He should be able to just use spells to transform himself, but once again, maybe he's missing that knowledge. Polaric says that for as long as he's been alive, there should definitely be spells that do something along the lines of that effect. Dice says we've already seen the baby dragon girl that could fly that distance no trouble, and she might not be using magic to fly, so mark against their theory from earlier. Yet 200 miles just, a dragon should be able to cover that in like 3 wing beats. There's something more going on. That's why I think there's something more going on with Terry and Eldavin. Polaric says the especially scary thing is that Eldavin is not dying anytime soon. That means that Terry is going to have a missing magic problem until Eldavin dies, and this brings up the possibility that Eldavin also took, the general spellcasting knowledge and acumen of how magic works, not even just specific spells. Nobody says that there was a section where Eldavin talked about being alive, being able to marry, have kids, so on and so forth. They read that as Eldavin being given a real body by the gods, no longer being a fake. But maybe that was just them. Polaric says that the section was suspect because Terry has been alive for bajillions of years and should know endless permutations of existing spells, which Eldavin outright said in 8.70 was in regards to Thrush's war magic. Ranarus says that Terry has been set up as being out of shape for a while, but I definitely understand folks being kind of disappointed with his character. We used that spell on him and got that whole moment at the end of Volume 8 and don't really know if we're going to see him doing much for a while. Polaric saying, hence this possibility. Mel, do you want to share your thoughts?
I think they can't speak right now, so they had 2 points. Asteria is correct. The Nier's manga art is awesome.
Justification.
And 2, Eldavin got nerfed hard. If a high enough person took a shot at him, he could be done. The reputation is protecting him hard right now.
He's only level 8 Magus.
I don't know if obviously levels don't really say how powerful you are. I don't think he's super easily killed right now, but obviously he's definitely weaker than he was previously because he doesn't have the endless supply of mana that Terriarch was
key.
supplying him with. But I don't think he's going to. I don't think you can just hit him once and he's down for good. He still has all that magical knowledge that he did previously. He just doesn't have all the mana.
Well, nobody thinks that it's not just knowledge he'd be missing. He's out of shape.
Eldavin,
and most likely,
not Terriarch. Eldavin.
Yeah, sorry, Eldavin. No, it's Terry. Yeah, he says because he's out of shape.
Got nerfed hard.
Nobody says.
I'm talking about Mel's message, not nobody.
Well, I'm talking about nobody's message. People keep deleting things. Okay. So nobody says it's not a knowledge he'd be missing because he was out of shape even before the knowledge removal. I think the magical dragon body is probably harder, or he thinks the magical dragon body is harder to manipulate, unlike Eldavin's body, which was a fake. Okay, so and then Polaric says Terry's knowledge of magic is impossibly large. I don't think he lacks this knowledge or that it's somehow too hard or costly benefit-wise, because his physicality is clearly bottlenecking hard right now. And then Aluji Frusta says Teriak is also missing knowledge. Okay, so there's this discussion of maybe he's just extremely out of shape from doing nothing for centuries, possibly eons, versus maybe the Chronomancer did have an effect versus maybe he's missing knowledge because Eldavin has it. So it's kind of a wait and see. But I do think something is very off about Terry. Not being able to fly 200 miles and not teleporting is a bit weird given what we do know of him. And remember, he did cover quite a distance to confront Ascrash. Or he's covered distances to anyway. We know there's something off about him. We'll have to see whether or not it's resolved. Circling back to the very first part of this question, where Eldavin is back and gunning for Ascrash and kind of veering off to Ascrash, Evan brought up this point was, do you think Ascrash is now going to get a second chance, possibly getting redeemed? We know that the gods are coming for Ascrash, right? They view him as the biggest threat to their coming back, right? With setting up Eldavin to try and take him out. We also know that there's a whole Drake contingent that's trying to also gun for Ascrash. So, and yet Ascrash is sort of being set up as our potential, somehow he's able to combat the gods. Do you think it's more Ascrash or the fact that he's harboring all those ghosts that the gods have sort of set him up as a number one target to get rid of?
I think it's definitely because he's um harboring all those ghosts, and they know that too. They know that the ghosts went to him at the very end, and so he now has the knowledge that the gods are a major threat. And so the gods can't allow that. Like, Ascrash is one of the easiest people they can eliminate, well, easiest people they can try and manipulate people to eliminate, because everyone knows that Ascrash is a huge villain and he's already proven that he's wants to kill all life. So pointing the world at him to get rid of him right away is, just the easiest thing for them to do. And so it's definitely because he has all those ghosts though. Absolutely.
So do you think
Um,
there's a possibility that he's gonna potentially somehow be, what's the word? I don't know, go like not saved, but he's gonna
be
recant.
redeemed?
Yeah, redeem. That's the word. He's gonna be redeemed, and we're gonna somehow see him as the new hero of the ages, or do you think they're gonna
Uh,
take him out and everyone's gonna be like, "Yay, we killed him," and then be like later, "Oh, damn, we killed him. That's not
I don't
good."
I don't think Ascrash can ever be fully redeemed, but I also really disagree with what's her name's? Oh my gosh, I'm blanking on every name today. Nerhavia. I don't think Nerhavia's point that he can't be altruistic is correct either. Like, I think he'll have some redemption in this story with him kind of pivoting from killing all life to going against the gods instead. But I don't think he'll ever be fully redeemed because, he's just done too much horrible things, basically. But I could certainly see him being kind of an anti-hero type of deal where he kind of sacrifices himself in the end for uh, getting uh, getting rid of the gods. But
See him going out in like one of these sort of he's got all this power, but then he makes this decision to like save somebody who's somewhat powerless. I could see him going out that way, right? We know he's a
yeah,
fanboy for the horns.
yeah, he used to be a hero basically. Like, he was the hero of Tarandria for a long time, and kind of I can see him going back to those roots and kind of, fighting with his own hatred, basically, that spawned from being betrayed. But
Yeah, absolutely.
let's read some of these comments again. Polaric says, in regards to Terriarch, he also flew to Nullmoot without any trouble after getting rezzed. I don't know if it's without any trouble. He could have been, panting there too. We just don't know. Ranaris said Terry mass teleported folks at Nullmoot. That's a good point. So probably it's something to do with teleporting himself rather than not being able to use the teleport spell. Scene K says, as D&D revival spells say, coming back from the dead is an ordeal. But I don't know if that applies here because this spell in particular is supposed to give you back your body exactly at the point where it died, like exact condition it was in before it died. Polaric says, also, I'm very surprised Eldivan didn't privately point out real Terry as a threat because Eldivan knows about him even after dying. I don't think he. Well,
He also probably might be hesitant to go after the dragon because
yeah,
he also might not know if the dragon dies, what happens to him.
yeah. I don't know if he can deal with that right now. Like, it's kind of hard to point him out as a threat because, like, just pointing a random dragon out and saying this guy's a threat in Wistrom isn't really going to fly that well. Mr. Europe says, do we know that Eldivan is acting on orders from the gods in his war against Az? Maybe they just told him to go back to taking control of Wistrom and making it great again. The thing is, Mr. Yup, is that Eldivan said in his inner monologue that yes, he would be going after Aelin Damas, or I think it was Floss. He would be going after them instead. But he has been like told to go after Azkarash. Like, let me find the line. Where is it?
Mel says, Nahavia manipulating Azkarash was amazing. I was laughing so hard during that scene. No matter what, Nahavia wins. Yeah, she definitely showed her chops. Karma Krebs says it was mentioned that he has orders. However, he had a mission. He had orders, and the Archmage of Memory thought about his future as he wrote missives to the people messaging him. So yeah, he's under orders from the gods. Evan says he may help until he gets betrayed again. Shawn K says, as is the best, fully redeemable, just, skip volume 4. Of course. I mean, this chapter did show he has. Obviously, all of our characters are fairly complex. Even Erin herself, right? Torrin was like, yeah, she's equivalent to Belvedere. Don't go back to mommy, right? When he was speaking to dead Maviola. Fake Maviola. So all our characters are complex. He is definitely not a good guy, per se. But he's not an outright evil, all is dead. I mean, we did show he has standards. He has that whole Tyrandian nobility thing still going. He doesn't necessarily outright torture and kill or rape or any of that. So, there is that, I suppose.
Well, he does kill. He just doesn't torture.
He does kill, but he doesn't kill like the torture, kill, drag it out kind of thing. That's what I meant.
He just wants people to die. That's it.
Right.
He doesn't want to hurt them.
Dead. Courier says Azkarash is assumed his target is life itself. Yes, that. Clay says that they think one of the biggest reasons Az is a threat to the gods is because he can recognize them for what they are and say, the word God. Shawn K thinks that Eldavin knows he's fully disconnected now, although he might think his dragon body is now dead. There's that possibility. He might think the dragon is gone. So there is that. Wiggles, did you have any last thoughts with this question on Azkarash and their everything?
I think we should move on to the next question now, which
should be about Floss, right?
No.
What? That's the only one we haven't talked about. We talked about everybody else except maybe the dwarves.
Well, this is kind of what can we talk about with Floss? That's the thing. Like, what do we want to
everybody
talk about?
hates Floss. Like, aside from Laken, Floss is like the one character that everyone is like, yeah, you suck. Like, I really don't like you. And yet he keeps coming back as a character.
Here's the next topic. We are now talking about Floss. So this is going to be our last topic for the recorded portion. We are talking about Floss. Do you hate him? What do you like about him? How did you like his section this chapter? Anything you want to say about Floss this chapter? And I thought the one really awesome thing we saw this chapter was that 4-way combination skill between the 7, which is not Floss in particular, but it was the Floss section.
Perfect example of how horrible that whole kingdom is.
Okay.
God.
It's a really terrifying skill, but it's also incredibly cool. Okay, it's the rule of cool. It was a very cool scene, and it's like I don't think I've ever seen those kind of weird ass combination skills happening in other stories, and it's so cool seeing them in this story. I
Did you
love
just
it.
skip over Dragon Ball Z era?
Oh, Dragon Ball Z sucks. So besides Dragon Ball Z, I don't care. Look, Dragon Ball Z's combination things just suck. Okay, it's stupid. I hate it.
That's
It's
exactly what
horrible.
I was when they were like, "I'm going to catch a lightning bolt and fling it to you." I was just imagining the Dragon Ball Z dance with the combination.
Really? Damn. I didn't imagine that at all, but
I did. I was like, "Oh, really? That's what this is."
that
But
is
just
certainly an interesting picture in my
you're
mind.
you're right. Like Floss's scenes always draw a laugh, but when you really think about it, like he's just one of these old school conquerors, and he's just a horrible person whose whole kingdom is just horrible. Like I
Uh,
just
well,
like ethics wise, like not horribly written. They're
eh,
very well written. The characters are very dynamic. I'm always reading and intrigued by them, but I'm like I like you people are just terrible people. Like they
yeah.
don't like you.
I certainly see it. It's kind of like this weird thing with, like, I think it's the modern mentality, basically. Like, if you look through history, basically, Floss emulates every single major
Conqueror. He's
conqueror we've
Alexander the
ever
Great.
had.
Yeah, he's Alexander the Great.
Yeah,
I
and
just
Like in his continent and in world, talking about war, talking about killing people is something that happens like daily. It's not something new. It's not something horrible like it is for us. It's a war. It's something that we can't really comprehend. And Sandra Floss is not even close to be the worst. That's for all you can say is terrible when it comes to waging war.
yeah, it's certainly kind of the mentality kind of deal that we have that it's hard to get into Floss's, the mental state because, he is someone who's been at war since he was 14 or something like that.
I mean it's just
13,
that
14,
that's what
15.
yeah, that's what it was said. He's like, everyone else goes back to lick their wounds and looks for the next period of peace, but we're constantly at war. That's Reem's
Yeah.
thing. It's like,
Yeah. And it's kind of also the leveling system's fault. Like, I
God,
don't know if you can really call it confirmation, but he's a king of war. Like, that's probably just kind of his base class, or maybe that is his real class. But he
King of
basically
Destruction.
needs to be at war to succeed. That's
Yeah,
what he needs to do.
yeah,
And
that's
it kind of just piles on. As he gets more levels, he wants to keep being more at war. And so
it's just
it's, yeah.
Well, there seemed to actually be some Floss likers. Courier agrees that they're contentious, but he says Floss is all right. Karma Krebs says they don't hate Floss. Mr. Europe says Floss is the most charismatic and likable asshole in his story. Pisces was an asshole for a while, but I guess he's changed.
He wasn't charismatic. He wasn't a
Pisces
charismatic
was
asshole, though.
charismatic. He is charismatic. He's like the
He's
dude.
charismatic now. He's
He
charismatic
was
now, but at the
charismatic
start,
then. That's the only way that he got through with looking dingy robes and people still wanted to. He's charismatic. He's just rude.
maybe. I don't know. Go on.
Illusi
Keep reading. Yeah, sorry.
Illusi Frusta says that they really like Floss. He cares about his people. Lord Panther says, I hate Floss. He removes the agency of the earthers around him and they're forced to do what he wants. Yeah, he's a conquering emperor, conquering king. I mean, he's just. Evan, instead of Floss, I think it's more interesting to wonder where the earthers are going to end up and what their roles will be. Shawn K says, well, I do think a lot of readers dislike Lakin. I think there's more hate for Floss chapters than Floss himself. Metamir says, if my country was next to Rashal, I'd be going to war before long as well. Play says Floss is a complicated character. He wants to make the world better, but for a selfish reason. He takes war lightly, puts his names on things, but he's a better king for his people than almost any other, besides maybe Fedahab. Courier says his actions have reinforced his class and that has looped for decades. Now he can't stop at this point. without just being, not being what he's been his entire life. The kind of ego death is not a small deal. The system is very funky. Evan says Pisces is the ride or die character, the Wandering In. Iluji Frusta says they think Floss got their class that he needed when he started out. Now he might want his class to move over to a different type, but the leveling system is locking him in. Dice says they thought it was odd that he met with both the Knoll Chieftains as well as the New Earthers at the same time. He seemed almost dismissive of the Earthers now that they're no longer a commodity, but readily available to him. He sat on a chair, left his kingdom to ruin, his pupil to total squalor until 2 kids showed up and got him out of his funk. His goal is to be at war with the world. Should he succeed and unite the world as his own single kingdom, I believe that he would do the same again. His kingdom would break into civil wars, dissolve into virtually no time at all, and he wouldn't have the inspiration to do it again because he's already done it once. He wants a war sim, not a city builder. Yeah, I'm ignoring a lot, but I can only summarize so much there. That's his words. I'm not actually summarizing. And Mel said they found the Javia's Fallen story more interesting than Floss. The political intrigue is more fun than Floss's words. I agree. Like, Javia's Fallen is awfully complicated. I very much enjoy that point of view a lot more than Floss, but we seem to keep coming back to Floss, which is why I said, hey, let's talk about Floss. Like, he's been built up as this character, right? The all-reigning conqueror of the continent and moving on to other continents, and then he only stopped because he essentially gave up and lost interest after one of his 7 died. And now he's gearing back up. I'm kind of the opinion we didn't really see a lot of his power or skill set with Chandrar over the last several months of war. He basically kind of just lucked out that everybody else got distracted by other things. I just don't think we've seen him as this all-conquering king. He just seems to get by on luck recently, and I'm wondering if we're finally going to start seeing this so-called destruction king now that he's got the remaining living 7 of his 7 back. I'm just curious if people think that he's this talked up character with no backing behind him, or he is this we're going to start to see him actually becoming more of a major power force than he's sort of not really been but talked up to be in the last several volumes, and what people feel about that, because I don't know. I think it's curious. Rennerus, you had thoughts?
Yeah, to kind of follow up on your question, I think there, we got this. If you just look at the story from a higher level view, he was trying to have the peace, get some people back, and kind of build himself up, and then go and just find an excuse to start a war. He found that in Belchan, but then the Minotaurs came in, and I think that was kind of a wild card he didn't expect. Whereas the Minotaurs came in, they were actually able to get him to use Army of the King, because until then he was, I mean, Rel was making a heroic stand, right? And the people of Drakros were making a heroic stand, but I mean, Floss was winning that. Floss was just great, I'm leveling, my army's leveling, he was totally winning. And then Minotaurs came in, everybody declares war on him, and then now suddenly we're in a much different position. Because Kel acted, the northern part of the continent is no longer in it, right? And now you only have Nerhavia versus Floss, and Nerhavia's already taken a beating. I think Nerhavia is about to have a bad time. Unless they can get to that palace, the actual real palace, and that holds off Floss, but I think otherwise they're gonna have a bad time. And I think we're about to see Floss just roll over the southern part of the continent, because I don't think there's anybody in that could actually stop him.
No, and that brings up another point, right? He's going after Nahavia's Fallen. He's trying to reclaim these allies that are actually assisting the Empire of Beasts. Pomelay's doing its own thing. Again, gets the slavery class. Whatever happened? I thought he was going after the Sand Kingdom. When was the last time we saw them? Those were the guys that actually killed one of his 7. Didn't he swear vengeance and he was going to destroy them? Where did they go?
I think they'll actually be the big threat for him now, is I forget the kingdom's name. I'm forgetting literally
We
every name
haven't
right now.
seen them in volumes. It was the Empire of Sand.
No. We did see them last volume, and that they were they were the ones who convinced the Nerhavian people to send their Djinnis against Floss. They did convince them to do that.
The
So
slave traders. No?
No,
it
it
wasn't the slave
was
traders. It was a
diplomat of
yeah,
Emperor of.
yeah.
All right.
It was a diplomat that convinced a slave trader and some Nerhavian nobles to send their
He is at war with the Empire of Sands, though. He declared it as soon as he got Dravish's head back in a box.
yeah, and Takhatries, however you say his name,
The bird.
Takhatries. Yeah, he was fighting them for the longest time until Volume 8, basically,
And then
when
he came back, so what happened to the Empire of the Sands? Because the Empire of Sands, this is like
they're
plum
gonna come
time.
over. They're separated by the Great Desert, so it's kind of hard for them to come over, especially when they're being harassed constantly by Takahatris. But now that he's back,
Yeah, he's
and
not.
now that he's back in the kingdom, I think they're gonna come. I think that's what we've been waiting for, basically, is for them to have an opportunity to attack Floss. But yeah,
I mean,
that's where I think he is.
talk about Empire of Sands. That was a creepy kingdom, right? The whole switching heads thing and taking people captive and preserving their brains. I mean, that was sort of set up as like the big, like, oh, you're
Yeah,
creepy fight.
it'll be fun to get more of them because they were set up for quite a while, a long while back as a very big empire, and I want to see if I want to see them more. They just sounded cool.
I mean, Dice
Um,
agrees with you. They wonder why we haven't seen pretty much any of the Empire of Sands, and they're actually right. They said we've seen two perspectives from there so far, and I think one of them's dead. And we did. We had that whole chapter from the perspective of one of the heads. I think the female head.
yeah, I think that was back in Volume 5, and then I think
Yeah.
we got a little bit in Volume 7 too. But yeah, it's been quite some time. All right, let's read off these comments real fast,
Right.
and then we'll need to wrap up, since I don't want to die to you, Asteria. Scene K
I'd
says,
only torture you a little bit.
I don't think Floss is terrible per se. He's more of a threat to existing power structures and the status quo rather than people. Like, if you're just a regular person, you probably have little to be afraid of from him because Floss is pretty hardlined on civilians versus combatants, unlike a lot of real world wars. And if you're poor, there's a very real chance that your life will improve if he conquers your nations. Nations and those in power fear him and they want their people to be afraid of him as a result. Courier says, I see him having the Earther present to find ones that will step up on their own, and the Gnolls are in on the Earther secret, so it is whatever. He's fine dropping them off somewhere, but he'll do it on his own time. Otherwise, he's just trying to protect children. You know, as you do if you're a decent being. And the Earthers, especially in levels, are very much children. But he's not going to babysit them or overtly press gang them into working with him, which I think is fair. Nobody says, I liked that we saw his empire building side. It's one of the things that we're missing, the part where he built things in Chandra, like roads and libraries and monuments, things that were left behind by his kingdom but aren't seen in the plot. Because he did build things, not just to destroy, for all his nickname is King of Destruction. Courier says Floss got to handle Nerhavia first, and he's not currently at war with the Empire of Sands, or if he still is, it's a very slow boil. Finish your current fights and consolidate first. Very prudent. Part-time Hermit says the current Empress is a far better head than Floss, though. I I get that's kind of a pun, but it doesn't really work as a pun, Hermit. I don't see it, okay? I'm gonna give that pun an F minus minus instead of just an F because it's not very good. But Ranaris says Empire of the Sands has been a great background villain. I don't know about a great one. Like, I think we could have used more foreshadowing to make her slash him slash them a better villain.
we had it and then it just disappeared. Like that's the
Yeah.
point. Like
Yeah, it's what I mean.
we had this build up and it's like, all right, like Reem's gonna go fight off the Empire of Sands, and then they kind of just disappeared. And that's why for the longest time, I swear I thought Narhavia was the Empire of Sands. And I was like, what happened to the head changing, now we have a writer? Because I literally thought they were the same empire forever. But I'm also get confused between different characters quite easily. So any last thoughts, Wiggles, on this chapter?
No. I think we did a pretty good job of covering most of it. We talked about everything basically, except
We did miss out on one topic.
what did we miss out on?
The
Trying to
hint
think.
that the dwarves are hiding away from some weird eldritch being called Grandfather.
What? Where is this hint?
Yeah,
This
right.
Oh,
That
I think you misinterpreted that.
What?
I think it's the best theory ever. When they're like, how everybody handles the being, long lived, and the dwarves are like very much in the present, and then when everybody dies around them, they go back to grandfather for a couple decades and like come back. I mean, I know that I was reading that line as like, oh, maybe there's this like, remember there's this being that they're talking about that's asleep that they don't want to wake up. So maybe there's this like eldritch being that they're feeding their memories and emotions of the past into the
Okay.
main.
Okay, Asteria. This is some weird crack theory going on. Okay, that's wow. I did not read that much into that line. Okay, I'm reading it as they literally are using it as I'm going home for a
Look,
while
look,
to
pirate twist things. All right, this is not so out there. And grandfather was capitalized, so Mr. Europe, you had some thoughts.
Yeah, this first of all, this isn't one of Quilly's crack streams, so but yeah, I mean that was, they mentioned that was what they used to say when they had been more far flung, when they like traveled or had places around the world. So presumably it's just when they go, like when they go back to the dwarf mountain to center themselves. And also they've been talking a lot about like the old grandfathers and stuff with a lot of respect. So the idea that it's some eldritch being just sounds crazy to me. Like maybe it's some old immortal proto dwarf or something or whatever. But the idea that that they're hiding from it is crazy.
Yeah, I don't get that vibe at all, but Courier kind of agrees with you on this. Courier, you wanted to speak?
I kind of get Asteria's crack, and it's already morphed into the grandfather is basically the Santa Claus origin. You know, the scary kind, and the worker elves are the dwarves.
See, this is basis in
It just
reality.
fits. It just fits.
I don't. Okay.
So does.
Okay. Okay. All right. I'm gonna read out the last few comments in this, and then you can stop the recording, Asteria. Lucy Frustra says, "Grandfather is just them going on a sabbatical to process emotion, FFS. It's just an excuse to go away and process shitty emotions so you don't go mad." Dice says, "I'm just gonna go chill for a couple of decades and get back to rocking my dwarfness." Yeah. Okay. So let's end the recording there.
Fine. You'll see. Anyway, Mel does have one big point for everybody who is desperate to spend all of their hard-earned money. There's a merchandise store coming up at the end of July, so keep an eye out for that. You can buy official Wandering Inn merchandise. Super exciting. I think there's pans for sale. In fact, if you were short a cast iron pan, so
Yeah.
exciting stuff.
And with that, we are ending the recording.
So thank you for joining us today on TWI Talks ACD. Join us next time.